They smiled for the cameras and filled the biggest screens in the world, but long before fame, these men flew through enemy fire, stormed beaches, survived brutal battles, and carried scars that no makeup could ever hide. These are 15 old Hollywood legends who were real war heroes. For them, the medals came first and the stardom came later. Let's count them down. Sabu Dastagir. He was the boy from India who became a Hollywood sensation, starring in The Thief of Baghdad and Jungle Book. But when America entered World War II, Sabu did something few studios expected. He stepped away from Hollywood and joined the United States Army Air Forces. He became a tail gunner aboard a B-24 Liberator in the Pacific, one of the most dangerous positions on a bomber. Sitting alone at the rear of the aircraft, he faced enemy fighters with almost nothing between himself and the sky. Sabu flew numerous combat missions over the Pacific, risking his life again and again. His courage earned him the Distinguished Flying Cross and an Air Medal. A child star who could have remained safely on a movie set instead chose to fly into danger. After the war, Sabu returned to Hollywood, but his career eventually faded. Few fans ever realized that the quiet actor they watched on screen had once been a combat airman. Don Adams. Most people remember him as the hilarious Maxwell Smart from Get Smart, but the man behind Agent 86 experienced the brutal reality of war. Adams joined the United States Marine Corps as a teenager and was sent to Guadalcanal, where the fighting was savage. Yet it was not an enemy bullet that nearly killed him. Adams contracted blackwater fever, a severe form of malaria that could be fatal. He became so seriously ill that he had to be evacuated. Against the odds, he survived. Later, the Marines used his strong voice and leadership abilities as a drill instructor, where he trained recruits preparing for combat. That confident voice and commanding delivery that later became part of his comedy had been shaped by military life. The man who made audiences laugh by playing a clumsy secret agent had once faced death in the Pacific and survived. Mel Brooks. The legendary comedian behind Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and the producers had a wartime experience that was anything but funny. During World War II, Brooks served in the United States Army as a combat engineer in Europe. His unit was responsible for clearing land mines and explosives ahead of advancing troops. Every road, field, and bridge could contain a deadly surprise. During the Battle of the Bulge, Brooks faced freezing temperatures, artillery fire, and an enemy fighting desperately to stop the Allied advance. Yet even in the middle of war, his sense of humor survived. After German forces used loudspeakers for propaganda, Brooks reportedly answered with music of his own, blasting Al Jolson toward enemy positions. It was a tiny act of comedy and defiance in the middle of a terrifying battlefield. The young soldier who helped clear mines would eventually become one of America's greatest comedians. Tony Curtis. Before becoming one of Hollywood's most handsome leading men, Tony Curtis was Bernard Schwartz, a young man from the Bronx who joined the United States Navy after Pearl Harbor. Curtis served aboard a submarine tender in the Pacific, supporting submarines that operated in dangerous waters. His work was far removed from the glamour he would later experience as the star of Some Like It Hot and Spartacus. In September 1945, Curtis's ship was anchored in Tokyo Bay when Japan formally surrendered aboard the USS Missouri. He climbed into the rigging to get a better view and watched history being made. For a young man from a poor immigrant family, it was an extraordinary moment. Before Hollywood turned him into Tony Curtis, he had already witnessed the end of the war firsthand. Paul Newman. Those famous blue eyes belonged to one of Hollywood's greatest stars, but during World War II, they almost kept him from becoming a military pilot. Newman joined the United States Navy hoping to fly, only to discover that his color blindness prevented him from becoming a pilot. Instead, he trained as a radio operator and rear gunner aboard torpedo bombers. He served in the Pacific, flying from aircraft carriers during the final stages of the war. Then came a twist of fate that may have saved his life. Newman was assigned to a carrier group heading toward Okinawa, but his pilot was grounded at the last moment because of an ear infection. Their aircraft remained behind while other crews went into combat. Some of those crews never returned. Newman later understood how narrowly chance had separated him from death. The future movie star survived the war and carried that experience with him for the rest of his life. Kirk Douglas. With his powerful voice and unmistakable presence, Kirk Douglas became one of Hollywood's greatest stars, but before Spartacus, he was Isar Danielovich, a young man who served in the United States Navy. Douglas joined in 1941 and worked in submarine-related patrol operations in the Pacific. His job involved searching for enemy submarines and communicating with other units. During a depth charge attack, an explosion occurred prematurely, seriously injuring Douglas. He suffered internal injuries and was eventually medically discharged in 1944. His military career had been cut short, but the injury did not destroy his ambitions. Douglas returned home and fought his way into Hollywood, eventually becoming one of the biggest stars of his generation. The man famous for playing powerful, unstoppable characters had already survived a potentially fatal encounter with war before the cameras ever found him. Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson became famous for playing intimidating, silent, tough characters in films such as Death Wish and The Magnificent Seven. His rugged appearance seemed almost too perfect for those roles, but his toughness came from real life. Bronson grew up in poverty in a Pennsylvania coal mining community and was one of 15 children. During World War II, he joined the United States Army Air Forces and trained as an aerial gunner. He was sent to the Pacific aboard B-29 bombers conducting missions against Japan. The gunner positions were extremely dangerous, with enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire surrounding the aircraft. Bronson was wounded during one of his missions and received a Purple Heart. Long before he became Hollywood's ultimate tough guy, he had already faced enemy fire thousands of feet above the ground. James Garner. He was the charming star of Maverick and the Rockford Files, famous for playing relaxed heroes who always seemed to stay cool under pressure. But during the Korean War, Garner experienced the real thing. Drafted into the United States Army, he was sent to Korea and served near the front lines. The conditions were brutal, with freezing temperatures, artillery fire, and constant danger. Garner was wounded twice. The first time, he was struck by mortar shrapnel. Later, he was injured during a chaotic friendly fire incident involving phosphorus. He received 2 Purple Hearts for his wounds, although recognition for the second came much later. Garner rarely used his military experience to boast about himself. Instead, he quietly returned to America and built a remarkable acting career. Beneath that easygoing smile was a man who had experienced the terrifying reality of combat. Eddie Albert. Millions remember Eddie Albert as the cheerful Oliver Wendell Douglas from Green Acres, but during World War II, he performed an act of extraordinary courage. Albert served in the United States Navy during the Battle of Tarawa in 1943, one of the bloodiest assaults of the Pacific Campaign. Marines were trapped in the water and exposed to enemy machine gun fire as they struggled to reach the beach. Albert operated a landing craft and repeatedly entered the dangerous area to rescue wounded Marines. Despite heavy enemy fire, he continued pulling men from the water and bringing them to safety. His actions earned him the Bronze Star. The contrast is astonishing. The friendly television actor audiences later knew as a lovable farmer had once risked his life on a battlefield to save wounded soldiers. His heroism was not scripted, and it was not performed for cameras. Charles Durning. Charles Durning became one of Hollywood's most respected character actors, appearing in films such as Tootsie and The Sting. But behind his warm, familiar face was a veteran who had experienced some of the darkest moments of World War II. Durning served with the United States Army in Europe and saw intense combat following the Normandy invasion. He was wounded multiple times and later fought during the Battle of the Bulge. For his bravery and service, Durning received the Silver Star and 3 Purple Hearts. The physical wounds were only part of the story. The memories of combat stayed with him for decades. Later in life, when he finally spoke publicly about the war, the emotions were still overwhelming. He had witnessed death and destruction on a scale most people could never imagine. Yet he returned home and spent decades making audiences laugh, cry, and believe in his characters. His quiet strength came from somewhere very real. These men could have protected their careers, stayed behind the cameras, and let other people fight the war. Instead, they stepped forward when their country needed them. Some flew into enemy territory, some fought on the ground, some rescued wounded soldiers, and others served in dangerous support roles. Their Hollywood careers may be what made them famous, but their wartime service revealed a different kind of courage. The next time you watch one of their movies, remember that some of their bravest performances never happened in front of a camera. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this journey into Hollywood history, subscribe for more untold stories from the golden age of Hollywood.